I believe that he was murdered. Well, I was shocked. And I wondered how it had happened. Because as far as I was concerned, I was sure he was going to appeal. And I was sure that he was covered under the non-prosecution agreement. But I wasn't in the indictment. So I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even one of the co-conspirators. I obviously wish I'd never met him. Looking back now, I probably wish I had stayed in England. But leaving that aside, I tried to leave and start a new job and move on from the end of 98, 99. So I wish that I had been more successful at moving on. Because I became a banker. So I should have, moved on completely. At the time, I wouldn't have had a problem introducing people to my friends to him because I didn't know that he was so awful. I mean, obviously now, really, looking back with hindsight, of course, but at the time, I mean, he had lots of friends. I mean, he was friendly with just about everybody you can imagine. There was no reason to imagine that he wasn't someone of interest to people.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, so she starts off with a usual high level of adapting, which is, I think, baseline for prisoner Ghislaine. I don't think it's baseline for her normal. I think poised and calm is her normal, but now she's lost all that. She has some halting language as she gets up to murdered. That could be because she's concerned about how this is going to be perceived, all kinds of things. Remember, she's preparing for an appeal as well. So how that is perceived is important. Well, she should pay more attention to other things. She goes to a new adapter when she says that. She rubs at these muscles in the middle of your forehead that show concern or grief and tighten. That's an interesting one for her to do. We don't see other times. Her voice intonation lilts and sounds almost if it cracks or it's weak when she says how it happened. So I do believe she's surprised how that happened. Maybe she's got some fear about it. Who knows? And then her adapting goes away. All this adapting stops. And then she gets to this point where she comes to a halt and she's talking about covered under appeal and non-prosecution, and her brow rises. That's an interesting place that all this stuff she's been doing disappears. Now I want to know a lot. I want to know a lot more why that happened. Her blink rate goes through the roof. And then she starts to slice herself off from him by saying, I wasn't a co-conspirator. The only remorse we've seen to now is her wishing she hadn't met him. That's the only thing we've seen. And I don't think we're going to see much more remorse as we go through these. I found two places. Listen to that convoluted BS around what he was, and then her voice intonation go to lilt again, saying, I didn't know he was that awful. There's a voice intonation lift. And then she did, this is some of the most severity softening language I've ever heard in my entire life when she says, didn't know he was of interest to people. Is she hiding something bigger than the stuff we know has happened? Maybe there's more to all that. Maybe all that's been conjectured is true. Don't know. This sounds like I'm sorry that we got caught, or sorry that you feel that way. When somebody hurts you and then tells you, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry we got caught. That's what I see here. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah. The biggest spike in blink rate, which we know is a stress indicator here, is right at he was murdered. And this might not indicate deception here. This is stress, which we know was blink rate. And it might be associated with making this statement publicly or the thought of him being murdered. And with no other real behaviors here to add to a cluster, I would say this is not deception. This reddening of her face that you see down here occurs right at the moment she's trying to convey that she didn't know he was a bad guy. I think this whole entire statement got her worked up, and I think she experienced like a full body flush that it was so bad that it caused itching even in her legs, and she reaches up and touches her face after that, and you can see that. At the end of this, where she's saying there's no reason to imagine he's of interest to people. She looks at our 9 o'clock very quickly and then corrects herself back to looking at her normal position, which is the 1 o'clock eye movement. I think there's a chance she had a very skilled and very expensive trial coach. And I think those skills are a bit rusty, in my opinion. I think she had training on how to persuade a jury from somebody who had some tremendous persuasion skill. Mark?
Because I became a banker, and we've got that elongation of the vowel there, and that kind of transmutation of the vowel to a longer, a higher vowel rather than a rounder vowel. So and we get an eyebrow raise on that as well, a look for approval. So she really wants us to know that she was moving her life on to being something really important, a banker. Not like you don't get many of those round this way. It's like if I threw a bread roll out of my window right now, I would probably hit the heads of 3 of them right now. But in her world, that's like, wow, I was a banker, so that's really important, really good. And I want you to know that I was that. So now I think we get a definite blocking of the mouth on he had lots of friends. So I think there is a suppression there of the names of those people. And she leaves it to our imagination, just about everyone you can imagine. Well, that would be everybody that I can imagine. And I know that within the set of everybody I can imagine, I know most of them have not met Jeffrey Epstein. So what I need to know is, what are the names of the people that you are talking about? And that's what she won't give at this point. And I think that's what that definite mouth block is around. She's not giving over those names, which I think is significant. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, at first, Chase, I couldn't tell if it was because of the video quality or what was happening. But as we go through that video, you can see she begins to look more flush. Her cheeks get flush, and she even starts the scratching. Up to this point, all of her illustrators, all of her adapters have been up here around her hair and those type. Now that's all almost exclusively to her face. So this is odd as well. And I think it's because of the emotional situation going on here. I think maybe she might have been in love with this guy. Maybe that's the problem. But she doesn't want to show that. So she's trying to lock down even further so things start coming in. But I think that's another reason she's goofing off with her face all over the place, because she's trying to hold that stress in. In the first 2 videos, we saw a whole lot of, like I said before, a whole lot of hair stuff. Almost nothing here with it. I think she pulls her hair behind her ear or something. But I think you guys have covered everything on this. But I think she maybe she was in love with him. I think that's probably what I would take from this, the way she's approaching this. Being guarded in all the ways you've got to be guarded during that because of the subject matter. I think we're actually seeing her emotion, a true emotion coming through on this. All right, we good?
Yeah.
Oh, Mark, yeah, man.
See?
Yeah, hands
That's what
down.
happens. That's what happens.
It's very British of you.
I believe that he was murdered. Well, I was shocked. And I wondered how it had happened. Because as far as I was concerned, he was going to... I was sure he was going to appeal. And I was sure that he was covered under the non-prosecution agreement. But I wasn't in the indictment. So I wasn't mentioned. I wasn't even one of the co-conspirators. I obviously wish I'd never met him. Looking back now, I probably wish I had stayed in England. But leaving that aside, I tried to leave and start a new job and move on from the end of 98, 99. So I wish that I had been more successful at moving on. Because I became a banker, so I should have, moved on completely. At the time, I wouldn't have had a problem introducing people to my friends to him because I didn't know that he was so awful. I mean, obviously now, looking back with hindsight, of course, but at the time, I mean, he had lots of friends. I mean, he was friendly with just about everybody you can imagine. There was no reason to imagine that he wasn't someone of interest to people.
If you like this video, get the full body language breakdown and analysis on our main channel by clicking this video right here.